growing rapidly now. Okay, can you please hold it? I can take it later. That's growing rapidly globally. Uh, we we have seen almost 3 to 4% increase in growth rate of hydroponic industries globally. They claim a lot of numbers. I've seen numbers like $20 billion industry, something like that. We can't verify any of that, but what we can say is that there is a huge interest across, not just in United States or in some Western countries, but also in many other countries, including Japan, Singapore, India. Slowly now, we have huge interest in Middle Eastern countries, and then also I've seen also in many Central American countries. So it's a kind of like a global thing. People are starting to use this platform. It's a new platform, right? We are more accustomed to growing crops in soil or in media, but here is a production system where we don't use soil at all. It's pure liquid culture, which offers many advantages. Okay, so what we want to do in this lecture is I'm going to start talking about different systems and describe, what are the benefits and disadvantages of several of the systems, and maybe towards then I'll talk more about how to do a hydroponic crop production in general itself. Okay, so let's start with systems. I think I might start with defining hydroponics a little bit. I don't know. Okay, so hydroponics is art of growing plants without soil, right? You don't use soil or even soilless. Sometimes the word hydroponics is kind of sometimes includes soilless media. I do want to separate them a little bit. Soilless media and hydroponics, especially, you know, 10 years before, soilless media and hydroponics are pretty similar because soilless media simply hold a lot of water. So it's just growing in water, right? It's not like growing in soil. But they used to include hydroponics, even soilless media under hydroponics. But now that industry is completely different, hydroponics industry is growing on its own, I would like to keep it separate, soilless media and hydroponics. Hydroponics is completely liquid culture. There is no soilless or soil involved in that. Only solution, right? But it's not pure water. It's growing plants without soil, but in water enriched with nutrients and oxygen. Those are two key elements. You have to add nutrients, but you also make sure that the water has got enough oxygen dissolved in it. Okay, that's the kind of definition of hydroponics. This is a picture of a nutrient film technique. I don't know. It looks like picture from somewhere here, but I'll show you several other pictures. But a little bit about the industry. You can see again this picture. It uses tomatoes. Tomatoes is a major crop grown in hydroponics, but tomatoes are not grown in pure liquid culture. Tomatoes are grown using either soilless medium like coco peat or coir in this case, or peat bags, or even rock wool slabs. What they do is they insert a drip tube and then they kind of recirculate it. That is even considered as hydroponics. That's why you can see industry split. The soilless substrates are also included in hydroponics, and that's the reason why you're seeing this. But if you just focus on pure liquid culture, no soil involved in it, the only crops that are included are herbs and lettuce. Strawberries are grown in soilless substrates, tomatoes are grown in soilless substrates, peppers are also grown in soilless substrates, but they come under hydroponics in terms of classification. But if you are only thinking hydroponics as something without soil, just liquid, and you are adding nutrients and oxygen, just those two crops, okay? Herbs and lettuce. They're all there, but on this picture there are only just two crops. Microgreens are tiny propagate. I mean, for microgreens you don't grow in pure liquid culture. Microgreens are also grown in soilless substrate. Okay, so they all come under hydroponics. By the way, anything that you recirculate and bring the water down into reservoir and then recirculate, that is considered hydroponics. Whether you use soilless substrates or pure liquid culture. I personally want to keep liquid culture separate from soilless substrate, simply because that liquid culture industry itself is a big industry now. Before it was not, and that way they were all combined together, right? But now, but just kind of like the split, okay? So we're going to now talk about different hydroponic production systems, okay? The first one I want to talk about is called nutrient film technique, and it's abbreviated as NFT. Nutrient film technique. Okay, the word film is important. You see, notice here, these are called channels. Okay, these channels have lids on them. You can cover the channels. You see here, they're not using lids. They are using styrofoam or polystyrene or whatever you call, thermocol is what you call here, right? That's styrofoam, and that's what they're using to cover. But in reality, I have some pictures I'll show you. There is actually a lid. There is a channel, the bottom one. On top of that, there is a lid. The lid covers the channel, locks into the channel. On the lid, you will find holes where you can place plants. Okay. Now, these channels could be circular. These channels could be flat. It doesn't matter. The real deal is with NFT, you see here, sorry, you see here, there is a thin film of solution running from top to bottom. What does a film mean? Film means it's not like 3-4 inches deep water. It's a thin film, a few millimeters deep. Thin film is flowing down the channel. It is flowing down because it is added up there, that solution, and there is a gentle slope. Because of the slope, the solution is slowly flowing down. It flows down to the end, and then it circulates back into reservoir. It's recirculated. And the next picture kind of gives you what it is, but that's called nutrient film technique. Let's learn more about it. So here is, I just drew this for you to understand the cross section of a nutrient film technique. You see here is a channel, okay? The channel can have a lid. The channel can be simply a circular pipe on which you can drill holes. People do that. I've seen in many homes in Bangalore, people are learning this and they are just buying PVC pipes, drilling holes, and then they're growing plants right there. But it is only called a nutrient film technique or NFT if you run a thin film of solution. So notice that there is a plant, those roots are there, right? Brown roots, and then there is a film of solution running down. The thing I want you to remember here is that not the entire root system is immersed in that solution. Most of the root system is where? It is exposed to air, right? Inside the channel, inside the pipe, there is a thin film of solution running at the base, but the root system, a little bit of the root system is touching that. But most of the root system is exposed to the air inside the channel. Because of that, the roots kind of get a good exchange of oxygen that runs through the channel, right? So they are exposed to air. But whatever the roots, the tiny portion of the roots that get in contact with the thin film, that portion starts to absorb nutrients and water. Okay? Does it make sense? Yeah? It's a thin film, that's why it's called nutrient film technique. Remember that film. Film is the key thing, a few millimeters deep. Because you're running a thin film of water, do you need more water? No. You actually less water. So one of the biggest advantages of NFT is it actually you can grow good amount of crops with less water. So if you have a problem with good quality water, you don't have good quality water with you, and you wanted to make sure that whatever the good quality water that you have, you're using it well, you want to make sure that you follow NFT system because it requires less water. Okay, yeah, you have a question?
Sir, in this one, the choice of the crop we are cultivating would be lesser.
Yes, I will talk about that. It's crop choices, we'll talk about that after a few slides later. And I want you to understand the mechanism here first. So there is a reservoir that stores the fertilizer solution. There's a pump in there. You turn on the pump. The pump takes the solution through the tubing and adds the fertilizer solution right at the top. Because it's at a slope, right? The channel is at a slope. The solution runs down the slope. It gets collected back and then comes back into the reservoir. Okay. The key thing is you want to make sure that the flow rate, in other words, the rate at which the water is coming out here, it's about 1.5 liters per minute. If you do it faster or slower, you are going to affect the nutrient uptake by the roots. Okay? If you do it faster, what happens is if you do it faster, you won't affect nutrient uptake, but water starts to accumulate here because you want the same flow, the water to gently flow and come down. But you add too much of water, it may not be a film anymore. You probably water starts to accumulate in the channel. Okay, that's a different mechanism. But for the film advantage, you want to make sure that the flow is about 1.5 liters per minute. Also, sometimes people ask me, what is the slope, right? You see here, you may want to raise for a sort of like, for a 10 meters long channel, it's about just about 1 foot raise. Okay, so just about 1 foot is a third of a meter approximately. A third of a meter raised for 10 meters length of the channel. It's a gentle slope. That's what it is, a gentle slope. That is enough for the water to flow down, but you want to run the pump so that the rate at which the water comes out of the channel is approximately 1.5 liters. So you can actually collect in 1 minute and you can see how much water has come out. If it is 1.5, it's good. Otherwise, you want to increase the capacity of the pumper and make sure that more water is coming through. Okay, that's what we recommend. I want to make sure, yeah, there's something else I want to talk about this. Temperature can be a big factor here. You see, what happens is all these channels are generally white in color, and there's a good reason for that. You want to make sure that those channels don't absorb heat. You want to reflect the light. The white color reflects the light. But still, during summer months, that air inside the channel, there's just air right at the top. The top of the liquid is a lot of open space that's filled with air inside the channel. That air can get pretty hot in summer. It can get pretty hot. Most of the roots are exposed to that high temperature then, right? And so that affects crop growth. So you want to make sure that, that actually the temperature inside is also cooler. Okay? So this is reason we actually saw a lot of times reduced growth simply because it got too hot inside the channels. Even though these channels are white in color, there is a good amount of air exchange between inside and outside. And if outside air is warmer, the inside starts to slowly increase in temperature of the air because of less ventilation, right? But with time, it can get pretty hot inside the channels. It's probably a good idea to actually measure with this temperature sensor and make sure that it is around 75 degrees or about 20 to 25 for the root zone. Okay, so that's another thing to keep in mind. There is another system I'm going to talk about. It's called deep water culture, where the temperature is probably not an issue for another reason, but I'll talk about that when we discuss that. Okay, so how do you grow plants in here? Basically, you start tiny seedlings. You remember the rock wool medium? I've shown you rock wool, tiny 1-inch slabs. You germinate seedlings, okay, and you take those seedlings. There are small, tiny net pots. You can put the seedlings in a net pot, and you can insert the net pot into those holes. So that right there is a net pot, and then what happens is, the key thing, the most important thing that you should remember is, when you put the rock wool in a net pot and you insert the net pot into that hole, the base of the rock wool should be touching the solution. If the rock wool is not touching the solution, it's going to get dried very quickly. It's exposed to air, isn't it? So the roots will die, the plant will die. It only takes a few days, for the roots to actually grow out of the rock wool into the solution. But you want to make sure that at least for first 1 week, the rock wool is continuously moist. And the only way is you want to place it all the way at the base of the channel. You don't want the rock wool to be hanging in the air. The roots will completely dehydrate and the plant will die. Okay. In many cases, the way we grow, we don't even use net pots. Our holes are very small, 1-inch square. So we take the rock wool. There's a tiny seedling that germinated on the rock wool slab, cube. We push it into the channel all the way to the base of the channel. Now the rock wool is wet and that's it. And the roots grow into the channel. They start absorbing the nutrients. The plant starts growing. Very simple to grow. The only key thing is you have to maintain the fertilizer solution, EC and pH of the solution, right? We talked about it in previous classes. But that's what it is. A thin film of nutrient solution runs down the slope, about 1 to 1.5 liters comes out, and then you use rock wool to grow crops. Like you said, crop choices, of course, because the root zone is tiny. It's about what, 2 or 3 inches, sometimes 4 inches deep. In that 4 inches depth, the root system is going to be small. So it is very good for leafy greens. Okay, very, very good for leafy greens. You can grow lettuce, spinach, kale, arugula, all kinds of leafy greens, amaranth, things like that. In addition, you can grow herbs, okay, all that stuff. But it's not good for tomatoes or strawberries or things like that. Okay, this is very, very good for leafy greens. Quick crops you can finish in 4 weeks. Leafy greens can be finished in 4 weeks. Okay.
So in general, the fertilizers are dominated by nitrogen and phosphorus fertilizers in the fertilizer solution.
Well, it depends on NPK is the dominant form. Then you also have some calcium, magnesium, sulfur. Micros are the lowest.
Sir, doesn't it cause problem in the channel like algal blooms or
The algae will grow here in the reservoir.
if they're not in the pipe?
No, no. So again, keep in mind algae. You raise a good question. Algae is like plant, right? So it requires light to grow and the nutrients and everything. So as long as you cover the reservoir very well, what we do is we make sure that the reservoir is completely covered. There will be tiny spaces where the tubes are coming out, going. Even those tubes will cover with black cloth. As long as you do that, you can control algae pretty well, pretty effectively. If you don't, if you leave the holes here and there's light falling through and there's a fertilizer solution there, happily algae will grow into it. And within a span of a week or so, the whole solution will turn green in color with algae and bubbles and all that. It looks so nasty, right? The algae won't grow mostly right there because it's a covered system right there. Algae grows down here all the time.
So, but the plants are also receiving the light from the atmosphere
Huh?
because there's a hole present there.
No, it's not big enough. Actually, within a few days, the holes are covered by the leaves itself. So as soon as 1 week or so, the holes will get covered by the leaves. But again, the solution is continuously flowing solution. Algae will not accumulate in a flowing solution. Algae accumulates in stagnant solution usually. So this is the place where you have to control algae. We in fact add some algicides. It's a chemical to control algae too sometimes. But algae growth can be a big problem here. The only solution we found is effectively cover your reservoir, completely cover it, no light. Okay, that's what it is. All right, that is NFT, nutrient film technique.
And sir, how long that tube can be the irrigation?
By the way, that's also a good question. We run them 24/7, but ideally you want at least run them when the lights are there on. Okay.
No, sir. Actually, the tube length, the 10-meter length, how long?
Oh, the length of the channel. Yeah, don't go beyond 10 meters. That's why I showed that number. They can be this long, but not more than 10 meters. Okay, 30 feet approximately. All right, that's the channel length, and for that, raise about a third of a meter, 1 foot raise. Okay, to create that slope. All right. In terms of how do you run water, we turn the pump on and we leave it on. We don't turn the pump off, so the water is continuously recirculating. As long as there is light, these plants require water solution. The moment you turn it off, we have done all kinds of research where you turn off water every 1 minute, turn on water every 30 minutes. You get the maximum yield when you run the water continuously. We also found that some cheaper pumps, they do well when you run them continuously, but if you are turning on and off these pumps, they fail after. Okay, we have hundreds of pumps in our research that failed within first 1 or 2 years simply because we were turning on and off. It's best to run the pumps on all the time. Solution is continuously going through slowly, thin film all the time. You can turn it off at night times. Sometimes we keep them on also at night times because we actually keep the lights on at night times too. We want to grow them fast, so we add supplemental lighting in greenhouses at night time. We want to push the growth. We want to finish the crop in 3 weeks, so we can get more crops per year, right? So in that case, we run it 24 hours, non-stop. Okay, the pump should run 24 hours. Okay, then there is a deep water culture system. So here is a deep water culture tank. You see a big tank, almost 2 feet deep, and then on top of that they put the same thermocol, styrofoam sheets, and then they are growing plants here. This is a watercress plant here, or some maybe other, well, spinach is also there, looks like. But the thing is, it's a deep tank. In the NFT, it was like 3-4 inches deep channel with a thin film inside of solution. But here is a deep tank, and the entire tank is filled with nutrient solution. A lot of water is needed, a lot of solution is needed. So let me explain in the next slide how it looks. So this is a cross section of the deep water culture system.
The chance of algae growing here
the algae can grow anywhere. It's a stagnant. If it is a stagnant system, yes, it's more here, but you got to follow the same rule. Cover it well. Okay, cover it well. Okay, algae will take some time to accumulate and grow. It's a threshold population. After that, it grows significantly. But if the crop can cover those gaps within that time, the leaves can cover, you won't have a problem. But make sure the tank is very well covered. Otherwise, you will definitely see within 10 days a good amount of algae growth. Okay. But again, you see this, compare this picture with the previous NFT system. What about the root system? In the NFT, what happened to the root system?
They were shorter roots, or the roots was.
Well, I'm asking about exposure to water and air.
Here, complete all the roots are exposed with water.
There are, yeah, mostly the entire root system is submerged, whereas in NFT system, partial. Most of that is exposed to air. So because the entire root system is inside the solution, there is a possibility for a better nutrient uptake along the root. So a lot of surface area of roots is exposed to the solution, so more nutrients can be absorbed. But the problem is oxygen. In the NFT, the root system is exposed to air, so oxygen directly can be absorbed from the air inside the channel. But here, the roots are inside the water or solution, so the water should have enough oxygen to grow plants well in the system. And for that reason, you put what? A big bubbler. You bubble the water continuously in these systems. Okay, this is not I mean, you can also put a bubbler in that reservoir of the NFT system, but we never needed a bubbler. We've been using the NFT system for many years. We don't put any bubblers also. Just that flow of water, recirculation of water, as the water is flowing through the channels, I think it is absorbing some oxygen, and roots are doing very well because they're exposed to air. But here you have to put a bubble. There is also an advantage of this system. The system gets advantage from water itself. Water has high specific heat capacity, meaning it takes a lot of energy to raise the temperature of water by 1 degree Celsius. Also, because of that high specific heat capacity, it takes a long time for water to lose the temperature by 1 degree Celsius. Both ways. It takes time to increase it. It also takes time to decrease the temperature by 1 degree Celsius. Meaning, if you maintain the water temperature, let's say at 20 degrees, the water will hold the temperature longer. And so the roots kind of can exposed to real good optimum temperature for a longer tenure. But NFT, the entire root system, most of this is exposed to air, and if the air temperature is increasing, the roots will get hurt. But here you get that advantage. The roots are almost always in a kind of like a stable environment because the water has high specific capacity. It actually does very well in winters. It holds the heat for longer time, right? So that's one benefit of the CF, deep water culture system, DWC, deep water culture system. Okay. In this particular case, it's not a stagnant system. Notice that water is flowing from one tank to another tank. That's also possible. You can fill the first tank and then the water flows in the second and third and fourth likewise. Big tanks, these tanks are that big, but the water moves from one tank to another tank. So there is not stagnant, it is going around. I would never recommend a stagnant system for hydroponics. That's called passive hydroponics, and there is some name for that, Kratz-Keats method or something. He's also a faculty from from our university many years back. But that system is good for small scale size plants, maybe in a bottle. If you're growing 2 or 3 plants in a bottle, it may look nice for you. But commercial systems, I would always recommend continuous flow. That continuous flow has benefits. It mixes nutrients. Nutrients move from one place to other through mass flow. For that, you need water to move. And it also kind of adds more oxygen as the water is moving from one chamber to another chamber, or one tank to another tank. Okay, do you see the difference between NFT and deep water culture? NFT versus DWC, two different systems. Okay, and some people prefer this while others prefer NFT. In this system, you need a lot of water. If you have less water, go for NFT. Number one deal. That's it. You have a less amount of good quality water, use NFT. You have plenty of water, maybe deep water culture can work. But with more water, it becomes more cumbersome to operate. The tanks are heavy. Water is heavy, right? So tanks are heavy. So you have to operate them. You have to clean them, right? Of course, you have to clean hydroponic systems between crop cycles. And I'll tell you how we do that in a second. But remember this deep water culture system. This is deep water culture.
The water in our area is very hard. If there is hard water, so first the water should be filtered through RO, then the nutrients should be added.
Well, like I said, the problem exists. If you have problem with water, poor quality water, hard water with more bicarbonates, that problem exists for even NFT or DWC. The only way is you run an RO water system. So if RO water is expensive, right? So if you have only one reservoir of RO water, which would be the best system to use? NFT. Because you can create less amount of RO water, and with that you can get a good plant. But for this, you need a lot of water. So one other option is just use it for 15 days and afterwards throw the water away and then reuse fresh water.
Is there a difference between the yield of these two systems, or they give almost similar results?
There have been a lot of comparisons. In fact, I have done some comparisons myself in research, and what I see is that the results are mixed results. Sometimes you get differences, sometimes you don't get differences. If you run several experiments, not one or two, but several experiments, 10, 12 experiments, keep on doing it, you start seeing a seasonal effect. That metadata tells you that there is a seasonal effect. And what is that seasonal effect? We found that these systems, deep water color systems, do a little bit better in winter compared to summer. Okay, and that I think we attribute it to cooler temperatures we have where I live, and because the deep water color system has a big tank of water, and if you maintain that water at 70, it takes much longer time for the temperature to be lost, and so the roots are exposed to optimum temperatures for a longer time in these systems. And also, given that they got a deep root system with all nutrient exposure, that may be another reason. So we see a benefit of this system in winter. That seasonal effect is there. But if you just run one trial, you may get a result, and you repeat it, you may not get it next time. What it means is they're pretty close. These systems are pretty close. Okay, but there is a seasonal effect. That's what we are seeing. It's just that winter time, this appears to be better.
Sir, can we also conclude that due to the deeper root systems, these plants are comparatively more hardy than the previous one, or they established more properly?
I didn't say that they have deeper root system. I just said that the root system is completely submerged in the solution, right? Why do you think it's got a deeper root? The picture may say that, right? The picture is probably.
Sir, actually, in the previous one, in the NFT.
Yeah, don't go by the cartoon. It's just a picture that I draw. Okay, but I want you to understand that actually the opposite what you're saying is true. If the plant is stressed, then it puts a deeper root system. So I'll give you an example. You take tomato plants, you grow them in a hydroponic system, and you grow them in soil. The plants grown in soil will have a nice taproot. But you grow the same plant in hydroponic system, you see a bushy, adventitious root system. Lot of roots. Now, there are some hydroponic systems companies, they claim that in our system, there are a lot of good roots. So plants is producing a lot of roots. But my question is this: roots are good for plants, but are they good for us? What do you do with roots? Can you sell them? Where do you use the roots?
Sir, we can use them in compost only.
Yeah, but that's like a long time after. But the point I'm trying to tell you is that if the plant is stressed, it produces big root systems. But if the plant is not stressed, it produces small root system. But in order to produce that big root system, it requires carbon from photosynthesis. That carbon is going to the roots instead of going to the leaf and to the fruit. So you are reducing the size of the shoot system. Remember the nitrogen deficiency, root shoot ratio I've shown you. As nitrogen deficiency increases, there's a bigger root system for a reason, because they're nitrogen stressed. But the shoot should become smaller in that case because energy is going into the roots. You don't want a really big root system. You just want a root system that supports a plant. What is the point of producing a big root system, cutting roots and throwing it away? Rather, you want to put that carbon in the leaves and in the fruit. That's where the economic yield is, right? So all hydroponic systems are stressful, in my opinion. Although you grow them in water all the time, deep water culture, NFT, or other systems, I have personally seen that the root system, first of all, that you don't see a good taproot system. Almost always, 99.99%, it's an adventitious root system in hydroponics. And the roots are big. They occupy the entire volume. Every volume space, the roots want to go there and absorb the nutrients. That tells me that they're all stressed. And the stress I think they're going through is that they're not in soil. They're probably not anchored, right? And so they're a little bit stressed there, although they are in water. Okay, there could be some oxygen stress too. All these things can cause stress. But in terms of stress, yes, you may argue that the entire root system is immersed in water here, so these are less stressed here compared to NFT. However, we don't see that in terms of yield. I think the tiny small portion of the roots that is in contact with water is sufficient to pull the nutrients for small plants. But if you grow tall plants, probably can do that with some stakes and other things, then you may start seeing some effect. Okay, that the tall plants require more roots, more nutrients, so NFT may not be suitable for that. Maybe deep water culture may be more suitable for that.
The roots, if they are completely submerged in water all the time, aren't the chances of plant disease or those increases in those cases?
Right, that's the reason why we need to put a bubbler, okay, for oxygen. Okay, the most important thing is the roots should not be exposed to light. They are in the ground, right? Roots won't get exposed to light. So you make sure that roots are not exposed to light for the normal growth. They are in the soil, so it's kind of like saturated system, right? Entire, but you are adding for the same reason oxygen to that. If they can get oxygen from the water, they are good. They can still do very well. Maybe there is a stress there, and that's why they put a lot of roots there. We have not done research where we can kind of quantify the amount of stress going through between hydroponics and a regular soil system, simply because such experiments are difficult to conduct. You need to replicate studies, right? So we have to do it outside. Soil is outside. Hydroponic system has to be kept outside. That is not a greenhouse. If we put a greenhouse, then it's a totally different treatment. So it's very difficult to do such trials. But I think there are many factors that cause stress in hydroponics. Although they are all the time in water, I think there is a stress coming from support, lack of support. I think there is stress coming from lack of oxygen in the solution sometimes. That's also possible. So these are the major reasons why I think they're trying to put deep roots.
Sir, in comparison to the NFT, we are giving a wider space to the plants in the deep water culture.
I did not say that too. Where did you get that information from?
So the tank is large, so
Spacing means at the top.
no, sir, we are giving
Are you telling that the roots per se have deeper volume to grow?
volume to grow.
Okay.
And sir, in comparison to the NFT one, yeah, in a previous class we studied about the bud capping that we use in the rows to shape the buds. In NFT, we are actually providing a lesser space, or however, the large cross section of that water channel, it might not be that big as compared to the deep water culture. So we are actually giving them a little bit space so that these roots can grow to that extent, and the remaining portion of the nutrition can accommodate in the leaves.
So in NFT, what happens is if you actually open the lid, the plant produces roots, and the roots kind of grow all along the channel. Okay, long root system actually. It's here it's growing deeper, there it grows sideways. Yeah, there will be almost a similar amount of roots there too. In fact, more roots in NFT than deep water culture. So it has nothing to do with that. So what I'm trying to say is, I want you to differentiate the systems. They're all, in my opinion, very similar. We have seen similar yields, except for the seasonal effect. This was better in winter, and it may not be the case even when you do that here. We have compared actually systems head to head, apples to apples. We recreated our own systems to make sure that they're all very similar, except for the way in which water is provided. And still, we didn't see much of an effect. The growth was very, very similar, except for one system that was there was a poor growth. But deep water culture and NFT, very, very similar. Okay, it's just that this is popular among some people. They started using it and they believe in it. But when you compare, we don't see that much of a difference. Okay, you can prepare these big tanks and grow them in your own house. It's very easy. You just need a cemented tank, deep water, 2-3 feet deep. Put a thermocol, use the same net pots, and just drop rock wool cube, and they'll grow in it. But make sure you add a bubbler. If not, you get into big trouble with this deep water. Okay, not many differences. Spacing, everything is safe. Okay. We thought, like you thought, the roots will probably grow well, take more nutrients, and the plant should grow better. We never saw that. Okay.
So, looking at in the NFT system, if we are recirculating water, is there certain pressure at which the water should go through that system?
It's not the pressure, it's the flow rate.
Flow rate.
Remember that 1.5 liters per minute I told you for the NFT? That's the flow rate you should maintain. 1 to 1.5. Okay, it's the flow rate that matters. So there is another system, is in between NFT and deep water culture. What we call is constant flood table or constant flow table. Notice the depth. This is actually from one of our greenhouses. It's not that deep, it's 3-4 inches deep. But So it is more like an NFT in terms of depth, but you kind of immerse entire root system in the solution. So these are called flood tables. Notice that there is a simple styrofoam, black sheet. See net parts, holes in the net parts. This is something we prepared. We buy pieces of all of these and we prepare ourselves. For research, you have to do it yourself, right? So, right? But what happens is in this system, just like this, the entire root system is immersed. In NFT, only partial, right? But it's kind of like a hybrid between deep water culture and NFT. It gets the benefit of using small volume of water compared to deep water culture, but it also gets the benefit of deep water culture in that the entire root system is immersed in the solution, nutrient solution. Okay.
Sir, out of these three, which one is the most cost effective one?
Well, it depends on whether you're buying or you're preparing yourself, right? Uh, if you are going to just prepare them by yourself, everything will be cheaper. But if you are buying, NFT system is sold more like a package, and so that can come out expensive for you compared to other two systems. Okay. This is something, you know, that plastic sheet is something we bought separately. Those net parts are something we bought separately. Those tables, the trays are something bought separately. Pumps are separate. You see down there, reservoirs, they're all separately bought, and we put our own systems there, right? But the key thing is, this is kind of like a hybrid between those two. It gets the benefit from both systems. Less water like NFT, not like completely less like NFT, but definitely less than deep water culture, right? And then the benefit from the deep water culture, that the root system is completely inside the solution. And we compare all these three systems, they do very well. The only benefit we saw was not with the yield. The yields are very similar in amongst all the systems, but when you get to water use, there is a big difference. NFT uses less water compared to any other system. So you produce same amount of crop with relatively a third of the amount of water using NFT system compared to other systems. The one biggest advantage is water use with NFT system. Okay. Yield wise, they are all very similar. So you have to make a choice, and if you are in a location where there is not much water, recommend going for NFT. Here. Okay. This is called constant flood table. Again, it's continuously run water. Whether you maintain a thin film, or you maintain a 3-inch water in the tray, or you maintain a 2 feet depth water, the flow should always be continuous. You are going to maintain that level all the time, and the water is flowing. It's not stagnant water at all. Okay. And then there is a flood and drain system. It's more like ebb and flow system. Remember ebb and flow system, sub-irrigation system we talked about. And when I talked about irrigation, I talked about sub-irrigation. You irrigate bottom up, right? That's what this ebb and flow system is a flood and drain system. In this system, you can grow plants in pots, and you have to fill them with soilless substrate here. Okay? This is for soilless substrates. And here, you don't run the solution continuously. You run it for 15 minutes every day in the morning. The soil holds the water, and that's enough. If you run continuously, the plants will die. Okay, but this is not pure hydroponics. It is for pots where you want to sub-irrigate the pots. So let's not worry too much on this. But I want to talk about aeroponics. So hydroponics is one thing, then aeroponics is a different thing, right? Aeroponics is different in that. Notice this picture. What's going on here? There is a plant here. The roots are growing downwards. Is any of the root system in contact with water or solution? No. The roots are dangling in the air completely. And there are sprinklers at the bottom. And these are spraying water onto the roots. They come on every minute. Spray for 10-15 seconds and then turn off. Then come on 15 seconds, turn off. The thing is, and you can see here is a real system where the roots are hanging in the air and the sprinklers are way at the bottom. Now, the key thing is this. The key thing is you want to spray water at high pressure. That is when you can call it aeroponics. The water droplet size should be so small, then when you spray that water, it goes and clings onto the roots. If you spray big droplets, what happens? They touch the root, but then they fall down for gravity. So roots won't hold any moisture. But if it's a tiny droplet and you spray it, the droplet goes and attaches to the root system and it stays on the root for some time. During that time, the root slowly absorbs water and nutrients. So it is a high pressure system. But people sell, in the name of aeroponics, all kinds of systems which are not at all aeroponics. So whenever they say we have an aeroponic system for you, ask them what is the pressure of water. And if there is not much of pressure, the same pressure going through, then it is not an aeroponics. We call it as a glorified hydroponics. That's all it is. Okay? It's not a true hydroponics system. There is also something else I want to talk about aeroponics. Aeroponics came into existence for only one reason, for research. Scientists at NASA, National Aeronautics Space Administration, NASA, those scientists wanted to look at the roots. Now, I don't know whether some of you may have studied roots in your PhD programs. In order to study roots, it's very hard. Why? You have to dig the roots, clean them, and then you get the architecture and the weight and things like that for the roots. It's a very, very long, heavy, hard work. So they want to use this system where the roots are not even in soil, so they could actually study how the roots grow in response to gravity, in response to light, in response to temperature, things like that. That's how they discovered the system. But some thought that this is a great system for commercial production. And they actually built systems like this, and they call aeroponic systems. But the problem is, among all the systems I've seen, the roots are largest in aeroponic systems. So what does that tell you? The plants are most stressed in the aeroponic system compared to any other hydroponic system. And then I ask the same question. What do you do with all those roots? You're going to eat them, right? So that's the challenge with aeroponics. Again, it's meant for research. So you probably have grasped it. I'm not in favor of the system, right? Because it's just meant for research, not for commercial scale. People have used it and they're still using it. They call it aeroponics, but I doubt it is aeroponics. I'll show you an example on the next slide. You see this? Maybe you have seen these pictures. There is a reservoir down here. That's where the solution is, fertilizer solution is. And they have this big PVC tube. Okay. And I think in the next slide, if I'm not mistaken, no, I don't have it. But let me explain. In that big PVC, inside that, the PVC has holes, right? So the plants are grown inside that holes. But then what is happening? There is a pump here, and the pump has a tube that goes all the way to the top. And on the tube, they put sprinklers. So when they run the pump, water goes up through the tube, and wherever the sprinkler is, it sprays. Those sprinklers are matching those holes where the roots are going down, right? But is this pressurized? There is no pressure here. This is what they call aeroponics, but it is not aeroponics. It's just glorified hydroponic system. That's all it is. They are spraying water continuously. Now, there is one advantage of this system. This is not coming from hydroponics, but something else. What is the advantage of this system? Look at the picture and tell me, what is the advantage? Compare this with NFT system. Yeah, what is the advantage of growing vertically? You can grow more in small space. You're using the vertical space. That's the benefit of that. But what we have seen is there's more problems here. The solution spray may not be uniform. You see different size of the plants. Sometimes even this plant starts to bend like that a little bit.
So it is more like modified NFT system.
No, there is no film or anything here. Water is simply being sprayed inside the channel. Inside that PVC, there are several sprinklers. So you are attaching a tube at the top and sprinklers along the tube. And when you run the pump, those sprinklers are spraying. Those sprinklers are matching where the holes are, so roots are getting that water. But you are turning on this continuously. And all of that water comes back to the reservoir, right? Whatever water roots don't take comes back to the reservoir and you're recirculating it. But it's just, just spraying them. And we see the growth is also a little bit less here compared to NFT or DWC or other systems. But they sell this commercial system. I've seen many greenhouses doing it. It's an example right here. Okay. So hydroponic systems, aeroponic systems, the difference aeroponics versus hydroponics is droplet size, pressurized systems. But people sell aeroponic systems, the name of aeroponics, several of them, they're not true aeroponics. They don't get the real benefit of aeroponics, okay? So it's better to stay with hydroponics. Some standard systems like a deep water culture or an NFT system, they work very well. okay, depending on the situation. All right. There is another thing called aquaponics, a third term. Did anybody hear aquaponics? What is it?
The fishes they were.
Fish plus hydroponics. Aquaculture plus hydroponics is aquaponics. Okay. So you get some of the nutrients from fish tank, from fish excreta. You get some of the nutrients, mostly nitrates, right? And those need to be filtered. Biofilters will be kept in place. And then that filtered water with the nutrients like nitrates come to grow plants. But then the nutrients coming from fish tank don't contain all those 14 essential elements, mostly nitrates, mostly ammonical form of nitrogen. Excellent. So you have to add additional nutrients like micronutrients, phosphorus, potassium, things like that. After the filters, you add some, and then you can't take that water back to the fish because fish will die. The other challenge is fish likes really high pH, 7, 7.5. Plants like low pH. So when you are combining two systems, you should be an expert in two systems. Yes, you're producing fish, you're producing plants, maybe your income is more per unit area, but you got to be expert in both. If not, they'll fail. So it's very, very important to know that the environment the plants require is vastly different from what fish requires.
This is the farmer we visited. He also had he was he was doing fish culture along, and that waste was coming down in the rice fields through the channels.
Yeah, that's something different. In hydroponics, we bring it into the greenhouse. We put filters, we make sure that all the bacteria that is there in that fish excreta should be removed. Otherwise, you'll get sick. A lot of people don't buy when you say the produce is from aquaponic systems because they have a fear. Oh my God, there may be bacteria in that. It's fish excreta, right? You can have bacteria there. Unless you do a good biofilter, you may be infecting plants, and then if you consume that, you get E. coli, salmonella into your tummies, into your digestive system, right? So it can be quite dangerous, but you need to be a real good expert in both cultures, fish culture and plant culture, to be very profitable in that. It is promising, but it is not growing as rapidly as hydroponics industry is growing. I think the reasons are very well clear. It's just that it's too complicated sometimes.
Market is not that much big in that way.
Oh, no, there's a lot of market. If for fish there's a huge market. It's protein. It's one of the most favored proteins, right? So there's a huge market for fresh fish in the United States. Most of the fish comes from China, and I'm worried to even buy that because I don't know how they have grown it. I don't know what sort of chemicals are inside that fish. I don't know whether you've seen some of the Netflix or YouTube channels of how they grow fish in oceans. Some of the fish are dying bad diseases, and they're just removing the bad ones and just selling the good ones. I have no clue what I'm eating. But if I'm doing it in a hydroponic, aquaponic systems nearby area and I can see it, I have more confidence in it. So there is a demand for that. It's just it's challenging. People have a stigma, when they know that, oh, this is being grown with fish excreta, I don't want to eat it. Right? There's a stigma in people. It's hard to overcome that. Okay, fear. That's the problem. Any case, you now know this system. The advantage of the system is you use more space. You space very well. Vertical space is very well used. The disadvantage is the yield can be less. It's not aeroponic systems like the way they climb. It is just a glorified hydroponic system. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about some of the nutrients and how do you manage in hydroponics. So here is a commercial NFT system. You see that NFT system in the back, long channels, right? But what we do in NFT system is completely automated fertigation. So there is 3 tanks, A, B, C tanks. Okay, tank A has calcium nitrate, mainly calcium nitrate. Okay, you don't want to combine calcium nitrate with phosphates and some other potassic fertilizers because they can react with each other and causing precipitates. So you keep most of the other fertilizers in tank B. Calcium nitrate is kept in tank A. Okay, and tank C is acid. Why do you use acid?
To lower the pH.
Yeah, for pH adjustment. You see here, right there, the farmer adjusts. This is the EC I want, this is the pH I want, this is the flow rate, things like that. Okay. The solution comes from the plants and a sample is collected right here. A little bit of that. As the solution is flowing, it is collected inside. You see 2 sensors up there, EC and pH sensors. They are continuously measuring EC and pH. Whenever they detect a lower EC or lower pH or higher EC or higher pH, they make adjustment. They know what to add. If the EC is lower, A and B are added, fertilizers are added at a known proportion to bring the EC back up. If the pH is higher or lower, then acid is added to bring the pH back. If the pH is higher, it brings down, right? So this is called ABC tank system. It's the most popular automated fertigation system that you use for NFT systems, for hydroponic crop production. And everything is completely automated. You plug in the numbers, you calibrate things once a week, and you forget about it. The water goes through, solution goes through, comes back. It is automatically sampled, ECPH measured, and automatically adjusted through using controllers here, using electronics here. Okay? This is the most common form. Okay. So that's the end of this. Any other questions on hydroponics? Yeah, go ahead.
Sir, do we have the same nutrition value compared to soilless in this hydroponics?
The solution concentration is mostly very similar. It's mostly very similar compared to soilless substrate. Yeah.
In the foods.
Oh, the nutrition value of the foods. Well, there have been a lot of questions. People started asking, we grow food outside in, in the field versus in the greenhouses. Is there a difference? There are reasons for that. I'll say one thing. Nobody has established a solid proof that there is one is better or other. But in theory, think of all those nutritive secondary metabolites. Most of them are synthesized in plants in response to stress, right? Secondary metabolites are mostly synthesized in response to stress. And one of the things that causes the stress in nature is the UV light. From sun, you get UVA light. But greenhouses, they filter off UVA. You saw that in this morning, polyethylene, you add UV blockers, right? So I'm not letting UV to go into. So if I'm not doing that, maybe I'm not causing that much of stress in plants if I grow them in greenhouses. And for that reason, it is possible that they may have a slightly lower nutrition value, something like that. But it's never been proven like that. It's never been proved because I believe that there are so many other stresses, nitrogen stress, soil volume stress, small part, volume stress, all of those can result in increased secondary metabolisms and they probably are contributing. So we have never seen sort of like a big evidence that says that you should only grow outside in the field or in the greenhouse and then you get better nutritive quality. As far as nutritive quality, I have not. But what we know is that hydroponics saves water. Why would hydroponics save water? Because you're recirculating. Just with a third of the volume of water that you use in outside field, you can grow the same amount of crop. So the biggest benefit of hydroponics comes from water savings. Number one. Now, that is the reason why Middle Eastern countries wants to use hydroponics. Why? Because they don't have water. Maybe in Rajasthan, that's what you have to use. If you go to CAZRI, there's a big research going on hydroponics. A senior scientist called Mr. Pradeep Kumar works on that. He's a good friend of mine. Okay? And he does hydroponics. The reason is that because, in fact, they are trying to take the polluted water and reclaim it and reuse it, whatever that is. But water is a big factor, right? Same reason they use it.
In general, when we talk about the water quality, when we have little bit of fresh water available, then we adjust it with a little bit of lesser poor quality water. Can we do that in hydroponics also?
People grow with, like he was asking, really poor quality water. The only thing is it starts to affect you're measuring EC, but what you're measuring what you call apparent EC. That EC is not true EC because EC comes from both fertilizer and non-fertilizer ions. If you have bad water, poor quality water with all kinds of other things, your EC is shown as very healthy, but that is coming from non-fertilizer ions. Look at the system. The system is only measuring EC, and if you have a lot of bicarbonates in the system thinks that good EC, so it's not adding any fertilizer. That's the problem with poor quality water. And it does affect almost a third of reduction in yield was observed in our research. There's actually a paper in Frontiers in Plant Science. You can take a look at it. It's from our lab where we show the importance of that.
Sir, that can be implemented with the manual system.
What is that manual system?
Manual system of sir, where we turn on the fertigation systems.
How do you do that?
Sir, if we know that the system has, we are measuring the apparent EC. For example, if it is lower or it is higher, then we can add that much quantity more or less of the fertilizer.
First of all, how do you know that the EC is coming from accumulated salts? You have not sent the sample to the lab, right, to get tested?
In the initial one, we can send the sample and we can get the basic information about all the salts present in that water.
But are you going to do that every week? Yes, right? That's the problem. So the easiest solution is throw it away. Dump old water, use fresh water, so there is less accumulation. Either use RO water, which has no problems to begin with, or if you can't use RO water, use it for 2 weeks, throw it away, fill the tank with fresh water and fertilizer and reuse it. You can use that water to outside plants or some other plants, but that's the simplest way. Otherwise, you have to send samples manually. You can't. These systems are commercial systems, and you don't want manual labor. Manual labor costs. You don't want to be measuring. That's more like research. These systems, it's like they have to plug and play, run on their own. That's where you save for labor, right? You got to keep a few things in mind. That accumulation of bicarbonates can be a problem. That's what I'm trying to emphasize. Because the system does not know, the controller does not know what EC is. Your experience may tell you. Unless you send it sample to laboratory, you will never know that, right? Okay. So what I wanted to cover is different hydroponic systems, the pros and cons, which is better versus other. Where do you get benefits from water use? Where do you get benefits from yield? Aeroponics, aquaponics, hydroponics systems, and then I want to talk a little bit about how commercial automated nutrient systems run with these hydroponics. This is how they use it. Yeah, I'll show you some examples when I talk about vertical farming. There also we use the same hydroponics, but what we see is that at least for crops like lettuce, it varies by crop, I will say this much, okay? At least for leafy greens, we have not seen a difference between outside grown and inside crop if you harvest them at the same duration, okay? Field crops are usually grown for 6 to 7 weeks sometimes, but here we harvest in 3 weeks. So at the 3-week stage, the yields are not that different. The benefit you get is you produce the same with less water. And if you are doing vertical farming, you're producing more in the same area. So there your yields are like, your productivity is higher. Yeah.
So can organic hydroponic system be possible?
Organic system, yes, organic hydroponics is possible. That's what we are doing research on. Current my funding is on that. Basically, you have to follow still the standard. You can't use a pure solution culture like this to get an organic level. You have to use peat medium or coir medium, okay? And you have to grow crops in peat or coir. But you have to use organic certified fertilizers. You can't use nitrates like that, 20, 10, 20, 15, 5, 15. No, you have to use some of the fertilizers certified by, there is an institute in the United States, it's called OMRI, Organic Materials Review Institute. This institute certifies this fertilizer is organic, this is not organic, based on the concentration of nitrogen in it.
So for example, in the field conditions, we use Bijamrit, Jivamrit, something like these formulation or vermi wash and something like that.
If they are liquid, you can put it in the tank. But I will tell you this much, I have used them, and in fact we use that. We actually have a liquid organic feed, 3% nitrogen, 3% phosphorus, 3% potassium, and it smells bad. So bad that I got a complaint from my greenhouse manager that everybody, because there are other researchers, isn't it, in the same greenhouse complex, they were all complaining of the smell. It's prepared with, I don't know what, fish meal, bone meal, whatever went into it, I don't know. So it smells so bad. It is a good supplement thing that we are adding, and we actually add a little bit of that. It's expensive, very expensive. We dose it once a week, but yes, you can also use that. You can also incorporate solid organic fertilizers straight into the peat medium and run with RO water, something like that, okay? Yes, organic hydroponics is now commercial in the US. Legally, it is possible as long as you follow the standard. You cannot use liquid culture. You have to use peat medium to grow plants, and you have to use organic seeds to begin with. And to be honest with you, there is a law that if you want to run a business, 2 years before that is the last date for any conventional agriculture. For the last 2 years, you should not have used any conventional chemical fertilizers in that greenhouse. So you have to wait for 2 years before you can start organic systems. So let's say you start organic systems after 2 years. Then you start with organic seed. The seed should be grown organically. Then you have to use peat medium. You have to use organic fertilizers. You have to use organic pesticides, whether solid or liquid, doesn't matter. And then you'll be able to actually get it certified. There will be a certifier who comes, validates, verifies, and then gives you a certificate. Then you can put it on your produce and say it is organic.
So because because in the field conditions we are kind of obsessed with the organic cultivation of the crops, um, with the and its demand is continuously increasing. So,
Yeah, it depends on. I mean, there is, when you think of, what happened to Sri Lanka?
yes, sir.
What happened to Sri Lanka?
So they completely transform their inorganic to
And then
organic.
what happened to their economy? They went bankrupt. So I don't know how popular it is. Keep in mind, organic production may be good for human health or soil health. It comes with big bag of problems. And my funding is because it's got problems. That's what I'm trying to solve. It's not easy. Okay. Um, we also looked into, at least in the United States, we looked into the markets and what people really like. Of course, organic marketing is there, people like it, but there is also, that's the kind of cater towards a section of population. Maybe, very well educated youngsters, they may want it, but not everybody. When people see the price is much higher, almost 50% higher compared to normally grown crop, people are saying, especially in this, world where everything is expensive now, right? So you don't want to be paying more.
So, but in the conventional systems, when we are using the pesticides in the concentrate form, yeah, there might be residues in the plant also. There could be cases of
Do you know what type
residues.
of pesticides you use? I'm not saying against organic farming. You actually spray, okay?
Yes.
You spray organic pesticides. They also can leave residues, okay? So the word organic is a little bit confusing to me. There is 8% nitrogen in one fertilizer, and it is still organic. I don't know how they got it certified. So there are thousands of pesticides. They call it organic, but they can also leave residues. They can also be poisonous. Who tested it? Who knows this? It's all, pesticide free is different. If you are selling something, my crop has no pesticide in it, whether organic or inorganic, it doesn't matter. I've never sprayed. That is good. That is a selling point. Or like you asked, my crop has 10% more vitamin A. My crop has 10% more vitamin K. That is a selling point. Organic people are crazy about it, but how many? I mean, those who can afford. In my opinion, it's not fair to only give that organic option to rich people who can afford and poor can't eat it. It's not correct. Everybody should have access to good food if it is good, isn't it? So there are some disadvantages of organic farming. I think the best advantage of organic farming comes to soil health, plant per se, or human health per se. Yeah, if you don't spray, in greenhouses we don't spray at all. So the problem of the pesticide is gone.
Sir, actually, the poor can usually afford them if they are farmers. Farmers do cultivate a portion of their land with organic in an organic way only, their kitchen garden or something like that. They keep the organic things for themselves as per the
Well,
family requirements.
I'm sorry, I have to cut you off. Stop. You may be supporting of organic. I totally agree with you. You can, but what I'm trying to say is not that. I'm not negotiating with you about good and bad about organic versus this. I'm trying to honestly tell you what organic farming is. Okay, that's what it is. We'll leave it there, but we got to move on. Sorry, we got to move on. That's a different topic. So I wanted to go to tutorials right now. Okay. So do you all have a copy of the tutorials? Did you get a copy from them? No, you did not? Okay. I'm going to open it quickly.